Good.
You're live.
Okay, everybody, welcome to Workshop Wednesday. I know if you guys come frequently, you've seen a lot of me. Hopefully they've been helpful. But SaaStr Annual's coming up September 12th in the SF Bay area. It's going to be great. If you want, go to SaaStr Annual. Please come. Go to SaaStrAnnual.com. You can use my code Jason20 for the best last minute pricing. But after we get back, there'll be hundreds of sessions at SaaStr Annual, hundreds of workshops, hundreds of sessions. Come do them live. But then we will start to cherry pick the best 30 or 40 and bring those speakers back. So starting October 1, you'll see, we'll take some of the best sessions and redo them again live. So you'll see a lot of folks besides my face starting October 1 or so. But I wanted to have to try to dust off something I did a while ago and update it for 2024. And then we can do some QA on this or anything related to it afterwards as much as we want on today. What are the top pieces of advice that entrepreneurs never hear that they need to hear? And it is, these are the mistakes these are the things that aren't said in board meetings, that aren't said to founders, that people aren't told. And I know most of these you guys know, you will know these 7. But I'm hopeful that 1 or 2 of these challenge you in a helpful way and help you course correct on something so you can do better. So let me do this in probably 20 or 25 minutes, and then we can open up to any questions that you want that's even a little bit related. And actually maybe all 7 are this, which is that every important mistake I've made this is from a SaaStr post in the last 15 years has been due to lowering the hiring bar. It leads to chaos, slowdown, doubt, and confusing inputs. Maybe all of these are about hiring because maybe nothing else matters even after $1 million of revenue. But okay, number 1, and I've written this a lot of times. I've said it a lot of times, and yet every month I'm in a board meeting and this is what we're talking about. Every month from someone between $1 million and $250 million over the last quarter, we're talking about this. And this is really the best single piece of advice I can give to anyone scaling. When you start to have something, it's even true of SaaStr today itself. When you have something, when you have $1 million in revenue, $2 million in revenue, 100 customers, 200, you don't have to be all that big. You think it's about the competition and the feature gap and that you don't have enough funding and all of this. And, it's really not. It's really the fact that it's just attracting truly great talent to your company. The best engineers and CTOs will build better software faster than competitors. A truly great head of marketing or demand gen will actually get you more leads than the rest. A truly great head of sales will actually move the needle. We can talk through all of that later if you want. All that matters is people. And the number 1 mistake that people make is the time finally comes when they realize, hey, I've got those 2 reps hitting quota. I'm ready for the VP of sales. Hey, I can't do marketing by myself. I need a VP of marketing. I need a VP of eng, of CS, of product. And you realize you need that person. It's most acute in sales, but it's in all the management levels. And 1 month goes by, 2 months go by, 3 months go by, 4 months go by, and you get tired and you just hire Jason. And Jason isn't great. In your gut, because you've been doing it yourself. You've been doing sales and marketing and product engineering yourself. He's not great. And honestly, you wouldn't have hired Jason if he was the first candidate you met with. And you got to commit to meeting 30 for any role. You have to commit to meeting 30 candidates if you're not committing to meeting 30 candidates for any role, you're not taking the hiring seriously. You're not doing enough work. You're telling yourself you're recruiting, but you're not actually recruiting if you're not committing to 30. But you get tired and you lower the bar to fill a hole. We've all done it. We have all filled a hole with it. And it never works. It never, ever, ever, ever works. That placeholder, that VP of finance that never actually gets the financials done. That VP of marketing who talks and talks and talks, but's never really worked with the sales team and mostly wants to spend their time on LinkedIn. The VP of sales, especially, that has like this great playbook and this 25-page slide deck, and they can talk all about how they did it at Zendesk or Okta or wherever, but they can't, they're not saying anything you don't know. They're not better than you at sales. 0% chance it works. 0% chance it works. Not only will they not work out, but almost always that functional area declines. Sales gets worse. Marketing leads go down. product slow. When you hire a VP of engineering that never learns the product, I see this all the time. I call them, never hire a CTO or VP of engineering that wears a tie. Never wear the ones a tie. The VP of engineering and CTOs that hire ties, they never learn the product. They're all about process and strategy. They never learn the product, and you end up worse off. You end up shipping features more slowly. And as painful, and not only that, that's the worst part. The second worst part is they hire people under them that never learn the product or never are great at sales. And it gets worse and worse and worse. And third, they burn all the money because of it, right? They come in and they hire 8 marketers under them or 6 reps that never closed anything. That becomes, and it's not, and sure, of course, this happens with the terrible hires, but it really just happens with the ones that you're not sure are great because and we settle. And I guess the meta point is, if you're at that point and you've interviewed 20 people, or maybe you pretending you've interviewed 20, but you've really only interviewed 8, and it's been 5 months and you haven't made the VP of sales hire yet, and you can't go on like this anymore without any help in a VP of sales, no matter what, you're better off with nobody. Anyone that's done this will tell you you're better off with nobody than a VP that can't really do the role. You're better off with no CFO. You're better off with no VP of sales. As painful as it is with your 2 reps that are driving you nuts, you're better off with 2 reps and you having to be the boss than a crummy VP of sales. It's the truth. So just remember this, and I'll go on, but this could be the whole presentation. You can't always be 100% sure a VP is great if you haven't done it before, but it's got to be in the 90s. If not, and they're not that, but the slides are good and their boss said they're good, you'll end up a year behind. Okay, second one. This is one that has become a real issue the last 2 years. It's become an issue because a lot of folks, because almost everyone has seen things get harder. Maybe not Wiz, maybe not OpenAI, maybe not until a couple weeks ago. Sorry, who went down? Who took our airlines down that was doing great until 2 weeks ago? Sorry, I got getting a little tired. CrowdStrike, not CrowdStrike, but most of us, even if it's gotten not that much harder, it's gotten harder last. Folks are sensitive, and sales folks don't want to be told they have to hit quota, and marketers don't want to be told that they have to hit those lead commits. And founders are getting a little bit prickly. And I have found that in my ecosystem, it's even founders are a little bit more prickly about advice. And I have found that founders have occasionally gone off the rail when they've been told the truth by their mentors and investors. And so I think this has always been an issue. Even I sometimes had some tough times dealing with feedback from my own mentors and investors. But just remember, this is just, it sounds simple, but the best folks out there, the best mentors and investors will give you advice that you don't want to hear. They'll give you advice you don't want to hear. They won't sugarcoat it. They won't sugarcoat it. You got to be if you want to be a great founder, you have to be able to take this criticism. It's your job as leaders, as founders, to take this criticism. And it's always been true. I remember back in the day, at old days of Adobe Sign, Echo Sign, we were all SMB and we were struggling. We were coming up on $1 million in revenue, but the growth wasn't fast enough. We were running out of money. We had some happy customers, but the product wasn't there. And I went to talk to my old mentor, who was actually the best sales leader I ever knew. And he was like a lot of sales leaders, not all of them, but he was a beloved guy, really liked. And I went and met with him. I thought he was going to give me a little pep talk, like, "Go, Jason, you're at $1 million, you can get to 2." No, he kicked my ass. He sat me down. He diagnosed this problem in about 90 seconds, as now I'm able to do for most of you. He'd done this before. He diagnosed in 90 seconds. He said, "Jason, who have you closed?" And I said some of the big names we'd closed already, even $1 million, British Telecom, GE Financial, a few others. He's like, "How many of them did you go out and visit last month?" I said 0. He's like, "Freaking go visit them next week." He's like, you're going to fail if you don't visit your customers." And he wasn't nice about it. He came down, as a sales guy did, like a ton of bricks on me. And I remember I didn't say it that way, but I was kind of staggered after me because I didn't think I could do one more thing. I was broken. I was doing support from 12 midnight until 6 a.m. in the morning for our European customers because my success person refused to do it. So I really wasn't even sleeping at this point because I was doing the swing shift on support. Everything was breaking. My founders were fighting with each other. One fired the other one. I had to rehire him. It was a mess. I'm like, the last thing I can do is just start going meeting customers, but he was right. I had to do it. It hurt. I give you many other examples, but I see this happening today. And I'll also tell you, The other thing that's changed is most of the board meetings are at today, no one will say anything. None of the VCs used to be, if you listen to old timers, they'll all say how mean VCs were and how critical everyone used to be. Now VCs are basically giving founders participation points, participation credit. Great job, Jason. We grew 3% last year. Good job, keep at it, kid. No one wants to be critical. Everyone wants to be founder friendly. Everyone's worried about what folks will say about them. So your investors you'll almost have to pull the tough advice out of them if you want it, but these guys will give you the best. So bear in mind, just build up a thick skin. And I just find in 2024, most of us have lost our thick skins after the last 2 years. Okay, third one, advice that founders don't get that they should get. This one's going to sound basic, but I don't think it is. I literally was just having a conversation right before we got on with the great CFO. She had been part of 2 companies that went public and was thinking about joining a portfolio company I joined. So she'd been around, and this was her top question. Like, how close are the 2 co-founders, and do they really want it for the next 10 years? This was great. This was like literally her first question to me after having done this multiple times. It's harder now. You know what sometimes I don't even want to say what the bar to IPO is. That I know it's a little bit discussed on social media, but the last 3 companies to IPO, Klaviyo, OneStream, and Rubrik, were all at 500 million, growing 30% or more at 500 million. Okay. That's a while ago. Okay. And there, you can IPO with less and you can get acquired for lots of money and all that kind of stuff. Don't get me wrong. But at least for a lot of folks, we have to at least understand what this bar is. And, even 5-7 years ago, HubSpot IPO'd at 100 million in revenue. Box IPO'd at 100 million in revenue. That used to be the bar with fast growth. Now it's 500 million. Now the companies are worth more. They're worth 5 times more. So the prize has gotten bigger. Even today, the prize is bigger in SaaS and cloud. But honestly, if the 2 of you, if you're co-founders, if you guys don't want it more than life, if it's not bleeding out of your pores for 10 years, I don't know that you're going to make it. So this is a question you have to ask. If for some reason you haven't found your co-founder yet, this should be the founder commitment test. It's a classic SaaStr post. I update the founder commitment test. Prove it by forcing yourselves, each of you, to do 10-year vesting. If you haven't started, here's a great test. If you're committed for 10 years, do 10-year vesting. If you're cool with it and your co-founder is like, oh, well, I don't know. I want all my stock vested up front. I don't want to do the work. It's like, you're not doing the math right? This is to protect the founders going long. So I love a 10-year vesting because it ties to this. But be honest, how badly do you want it? Do you want it? Because the prize, even with multiples being down, even with the markets are being down, the financial and other benefits in SaaS are bigger than ever. There's more, there's HubSpot went public at $1 billion. Today it's worth 30 billion. But it takes longer, folks. It takes longer. So do you want it for 10 years? Figure that out. Okay, 4. This is a tough one. And I've written this a few times. I don't see anyone talking about this enough. And I never see this in investor slides or board slides. You got to do this. You got to do this every month if you can, every quarter, worst case, but ideally every single month. Are you gaining or losing market share? This is a proxy for if you're falling in or out of product market fit. So, especially if you do annual contracts, it could take you 2 years to realize you're falling out of product market fit, because a lot of times, a lot of folks will renew because it's work to change vendors. The more SMB you are, the more quickly you'll see it. But we're not consumer. Okay. People don't typically cancel our applications in 30 seconds. Okay. So it takes at best quarters to see the decay of product market fit. But the learning, guys, and I know everybody knows this, but I don't see founders being honest enough about it, or executives or leaders. You're either gaining product market fit or you're decaying from product market fit. And WebEx had a slow decay, and then that little app Zoom came in, and then boom, right? It blew up. Zoom may even be slightly falling out of product market fit, not in the enterprise where Zoom is actually growing nicely, but it isn't growing for end consumers anymore. Is it falling out? I don't know. But what you have to do is this little point on the bottom. If nothing else, in tougher times, easier times, middle times, you always have to be growing faster than your competitors. Now, if you're in an impacted category today and your growth slowed from 100% in 2021 to 30% today, that's tough. Okay. But you better go find out how your bigger competitor is doing. Because if your growth slowed from 100 to 30, but your bigger competitor is growing 40, you're falling out of product market fit. you're falling behind the competition. If you're at 30 and your bigger competitor really is growing 10, okay, well, listen, you can blame that on the market because you're still growing faster than them. But you should, at a minimum, be growing faster than your larger competitors at a bare minimum, and ideally gaining share, like more objectively. But however you do it, find out how quickly. Interview folks from the sales team. Do something kind of lame, which is do an interview there. Do whatever it takes. Track the number of employees. Do whatever it takes to figure out how much revenue your customers have and how quickly it's growing. And be brutally honest if you're growing more quickly than them. And if not, it's you. It's not the market, it's you. And I almost never see folks having this conversation. Okay, 5. This one's a niche one. It's a subtle one, and it's not always actionable, but I'll bring it up because it is a top thing that's not discussed. If you are raising venture capital or plan to, and you have choices, and a lot of us don't have choices. So much Twitter and X advice is some sort of theoretical advice, like 87 VCs all want to give you $100 million. Most of you, it's hard to get one offer, okay? But if you have options, realize that bad investors can really hurt you. And I'll give you a couple examples. And why do I say this is because the bad is almost in air quotes. You could have someone from a very fancy brand, a very fancy fund. You could have someone that you personally like a lot, that you as a human like, but they might not be there for you. They might not support you. And there's a couple ways that can impact you. One is just when you need to raise more funding, if your existing investors aren't supportive, it's really, really, really hard. Because listen, if you're Wiz, everyone's going to want to invest in you as long as they can afford it. But if you're most of us will be on the bubble, like growth's good, but not great, or great, but not perfect. It is hard. It takes time. And if you're a new investor and you're kind of interested in Amelia's startup and it looks pretty good, but you're not sure, you're on the edge, the third or fourth thing you're going to do is reach out to the existing investors and ask, do you love it? And the best question that folks always ask, is this one of your top companies in your current portfolio? Is it one of the best? And VCs have incentives to not act, believe it or not, to not be supportive in that situation. So you want someone that's going to support you. You also want someone that, if you're doing okay, but not great, and they have the money, will write you a bridge check. I will tell you about 18, like one of the fastest growing companies I've invested in, they're at 25 million in revenue, growing 10% a month now. Okay. It's pretty high if you compound that, right? It's not Wiz, but it's pretty high. 18 months ago, they went through a really rough patch. I was the only person on planet Earth that would put in, and I don't even have that much money to invest. I was the only person. There were multiple multi-billion-dollar funds on the cap table. Not a single one would put the money in. Okay. So those are two sort of logistical issues. Will they support other folks, and will they write another check? There's a third one, and it's tough. Once in a while, I have to be careful that it's not me. Not literally, but figuratively, if you're too critical, going to the prior point. But a bad investor also can kind of create a crisis of confidence across your syndicate, or even sometimes in your VPs if they're too negative. So look, I don't have all the perfect answers here. Doing founder diligence on VCs is actually surprisingly hard. It's always going to be mixed or nuanced, but I would say investors are a little bit like VPs. If you have more than one choice, if nothing else, slow it down. Anyone that tells you you have to sign a term sheet in 24 hours, if they want the deal, they'll always give you 48 hours. Ask for a little more time, okay? And 2, if you have more than one person that wants to invest in you, just like when you go to hire your VPs, brands matter. Having Sequoia on your cap table is great. Having Andreessen on your cap table is great. But it's not the only factor. Slow it down. So many founders are blinded by that logo and they make the wrong decision. So just slow it down and figure out who will be the most there for you. Okay, just 2 more and then we'll take some questions. This number 6 is the flip side of number 1. Number 1, which is almost all that really matters of all the advice founders don't hear enough, is if you're not 95% sure that's a great VP, don't make the hire. You will just waste a year and half your money. I honestly could just, it would bore everybody. I could give that advice 52 weeks a year. That'd be the Workshop Wednesday. Cause we're all going to I keep making that mistake. Everyone makes that mistake. The flip side is, okay, you made a hire. And two things are going to happen. First of all, they're not all going to work out. I put this up on our YouTube the other day, but I watched a slightly older SaaStr annual session with Dev, who's the CEO of Mongo, was being interviewed by Jody Bonsall, who was the founder of AppDynamics, with Cisco bought for 3.7 billion, is now the CEO of Harness. And he asked this great question of Dev, who's a great operator, multiple operators, CEO of MongoDB. And he's like, what percent of your VPs work out? To Dev at this scale at Mongo after all these years? He's like 60%. Dev said 60%. He said, that's high. You're lucky if 60% of your VPs work out. And it's hard. It's hard to get to know people enough. And even if you do get to know enough, the VPs often don't know what your executives often don't know what they're getting themselves into. They haven't worked there for 10 years. They don't know. The situation's different. The dynamic's different. They cannot work out. And so even if you're 95% sure, and a lot of times you're not, and you make the hire anyway, but even if you do, here's the mistake that the devs of the world at Mongo don't make, but I would say not 80% of founders make, 90%. Okay, maybe 93.6% of founders make. They give them too much time. You guys have done this at least once or twice. They give them too much time. Here's the truth. A VP that has not leveled things up in 90 days, they never will. They never will. This isn't to say that everyone should go in and triple sales in the first 90 days. This isn't to say that you can quintuple the number of leads from marketing, or that you can triple the velocity that you built, that you ship code for product and engineering, or that your NRR goes from 80 to 140 in customer success. It can't always. Sometimes that does happen. Sometimes you can, a VP of sales can double sales in 90 days. Mine did. We've talked about it on SaaStr, but you got to see something happen in those 90 days, because the things they know, the people they bring in, the mediocre reps they move out. So if you're in sales, let's say you're a VP of sales, you come in, there's 4 reps there. Okay. Here's what any good VP of sales does. They analyze the 4, usually two are hitting quota, 2 aren't. You move out the 2 that aren't, and you bring in one of your friends that you know is great. Now you've got 3 performers instead of 2 performers and 2 failures. That inherently increases revenue, just because the leads you already have are going to close at a higher rate for more revenue. Like that always happens with a great VP of sales. Revenue always goes up, even if there's no more leads, even if nothing else happens. They improve the quality of the team under them, and revenue goes up in 90 days, always 100% of the time with a real VP of sales. And this happens in every function. And I see so many startups, so many founders, so many board meetings I go in, and it's month 180 and nothing's changed in the area. And, Jason comes to present the VP of sales, and he doesn't really talk about the numbers, or it's all qualitative. And everyone likes Jason because he worked at MongoDB or wherever he works, but nothing's happening. Like, it's never going to happen. It will never happen. You've just wasted 6 months. So I'm hoping you at least realize this in 90 days. If you've hired a VP and you love them, or especially if you didn't, and 90 days go by and nothing's improved, take a process check. And in a perfect world, you would take action that afternoon, that day, and say, I'm sorry, Jason. It's not your fault. It's mine. It was a mishire. It was a mismatch. You will go somewhere else and be much more successful in our company, but we've got to move on. I hope you do that on day 91 or even day 61. You can do it 91. But if not, don't let it go 180 days. Don't let 100. It never gets better that second quarter. Never, ever, never, ever, 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 ever does a VP get better the second quarter. Now, do individual contributors under them sometimes get better in the second quarter? Yeah, here's the thing. Like, for example, this is true of any report for you for a founder. So if you hire a sales rep on your team and founder-led sales and they don't sell in 90 days, it's over. Like, you got to move on. Now, when you hire a great VP of sales and they hire 20 reps, they may say, hey, listen, Amelia's the best I've ever worked with. Even though she didn't put any points on the board, the first 90 days, trust me, it's going to happen. And that VP of sales will backfill Amelia, and he's worked with her before and he knows she's great. So your VPs can make some of their own decisions here when they have time, but not your direct reports. If they haven't tilted the curve in 90 days, they never, ever will. And I can't tell you how many board meetings, how many founders I meet with at the door closes at the end of the board meeting with the executives. And it's been 100 days and nothing's improved in sales. And I'm like, how you think Jason's doing to the CEO? Jason's doing great. I'm like, okay, I don't mean to be that guy from the second point that gives you the bad news, but it's never going to get better. I know it's terrible. I know you put so much energy into this hire. And this is the other thing. We get so tired because it took us 6 months to find that VP. This is what I hear from a lot of founders, especially founders that aren't from hot companies, founders from outside the Bay Area, outsiders will say, listen, I know that Jason's not doing great in sales, but it took me 6 months to find him. I can't just move on. But you realize you're better off with no one. You're better off with no one. A related point, and then I'll do the final one and do, if a VP hasn't put any points on the board the first 90 days, if they haven't tilted the curve, more importantly, tilted the curve, they never will. A related point, and this is what I'm seeing a lot more often these days, which didn't used to happen in SaaS and cloud when we all kind of grew at the same rates. But now a lot of folks are seeing deceleration. They are seeing slowdown. And the question is, and it's hard. It's hard. Not only is it hard to hit the numbers, it's hard emotionally on us when sales gets harder. It's hard on all of us when revenue slows, because it's not like we get to work less hard. I mean, some people do kind of check out and work less hard these days, but it doesn't make a lot of jobs any easier. And so the question is, how many quarters do you give a VP to get us back on track? Because of the macro effects and the yen trade or this, like it's never their fault. How long? Okay. So listen, you've got to give everyone a mulligan. Like if they've done well for a year and then they have a rough fifth quarter, you've got to give everybody a mulligan. Anyone that's great, if they prove themselves for 4 quarters, of course they get an off quarter. But they don't. But after 2 off quarters, I find that almost every role they've lost the confidence. They've lost the spark. They don't believe. I was at a board meeting the other day with a first-time VP of sales who I loved, someone that had gone, was like the 6th hire and had taken them all up to 30 million in revenue, all on his own. VP of sales, first time, love him to death. But it's been 4 quarters where not only are things flat, but he's negative now. Every board meeting he comes, he's like, we can't do any better. We can't do any better. It's the market. And as great as he was, and maybe there's some other role for him in business development or strategy or customer success, you got to move on. It's 2 quarters. It's just, you never get your mojo back across it. You never get your mojo back, especially in sales. You never get it back. So you got to move on. I never see a VP with 2 bad quarters reaccelerate. Just never, ever, never, ever, ever see it. Okay, last point. And this is only for a subset of folks, admittedly, especially these days. Most of us don't have the luxury of having millions of dollars in the bank, but some of you will. Can't spend your way out of a rough patch. Can't spend your way out of a tough patch. Never seen it work. This is, if you are lucky enough to raise millions or even tens of millions or even more, a lot of folks are going to want to spend your way out of a rough patch. This is why you open up, you read your Twitter or your TechCrunch and you're like, this company raised $200 million. They ran out of money. A lot of founders, you'll be scratching. How could you possibly raise $200 million and run out of money? Now, if you hired 1,000 engineers and you're an AI company, you had no revenue, you could see how it is, right? With all the salaries and all the math. But how could a B2B company run out of money raising 20 million, 50 million, 100 million, 200 million? The real answer, if you learn, is they try to spend your way out of a tough patch, right? I was recently talking with the CEO of a unicorn that had raised a couple $100 million at over $1 billion valuation, a couple $100 million. And the burn rate was 2 million with about 20 million left in the bank. How many months is that? 10 months, right? I asked him what he thought to do, because I like the CEO a lot. He's like, I've just got to spend more. I've got to spend more to get growth back, because growth had slowed. Even then, he's got 10 months left. He's got 20 million left out of 200. He spent 90% of it, and he still believes he's going to spend his way out of this. I can't tell you how many times I see this. And you got to realize that it doesn't work. There is not this magical place. Maybe there's little pockets of B2C and e-commerce where you can spool up spend and people will buy more of your jewelry. Maybe that's out there. I've never found it work in B2B. I've never found this magical way where if I spend $2 million more of my scarce capital next quarter, my growth will magically go for 30 to 100 million. You've got product market fit issues, what we talked about. You've got competitive issues. You've got team issues. You cannot spend your way out of a tough patch. It's not the answer. And if venture capital seems alluring, if you haven't raised it before, you will realize later that it is extremely expensive. It is extremely dilutive, and it is extremely addictive. It is, if nothing else, do not get it. If you raise capital, spend it like it's your own money, because it's addictive. And spending your way out of a touchback, there's a lot of probably psychological reasons that happens. but I think they're addicted, just like people are addicted to alcohol or gambling, and they're just addicted to this fundraising. And they just like the gambler goes in. Listen, I don't gamble, but I watch the movies, right? The gambler goes in and like they're almost out of money. What do? They gamble even more. Right. And then this is what founders do. They're gamblers, and they gamble even more with that money. And they never roll the hard 7 or whatever the metaphor is. So you cannot spend your way out of a top patch. Realize this. If you're planning to, go talk with your mentors, go talk with the one person on your board that isn't insane. Go talk to the VC that was your seed investor that didn't give you all that money, and ask him, is this going to work before you do it? Can I spend the way of my rough patch? And the answer you're going to get is no. Okay, so those are my 7 guys. Thanks for that, and we can open it up to any questions on this or anything vaguely related.
Okay, you got a lot of camaraderie in the comments. Matteo, I think you've had your hand raised for a while. If you want to ask your question.
Thank you. Hi, Jay. So looking forward to see you in SaaStr in a few weeks.
Awesome. See you there.
Yes. Well, I have a lot of questions, but I think I'll just, if it's okay, if I can do 2 real fast.
You can do 1.5, but yeah, shoot them out.
Okay, thank you. The first one is, well, I listen a lot to kind of like to the EchoSign Mafia.
Yes.
So I remember your first VP of sales, or not first VP of sales, this guy that was the former LinkedIn VP.
Brendan. Yeah, we've talked about him a lot over the years.
Yes. So I have been listening to a few pods that he has been able to be in, and he spoke like some things that, some things that really worked out for him. Maybe I understood wrong, was hiring folks just like fresh out of college, So actually I was literally, I was looking to a pattern for from our own company, and all of our top sales reps have been fresh out of college, And
what's your deal size? What's your ACV?
It's around like 40K annually, more or less.
Okay.
It's not fully SaaS, by the way. It's a little bit much more services. So I'm not that in.
And is it most okay? But what's worked for you is kids straight out of school, right?
Yes,
like what's the question?
They have worked exactly, and the folks that I have been able to hire that are 28, 30, they have been really bad. So what are your thoughts on that?
Well, look, it's my thoughts are nuanced. I'm struggling to relearn some things today, right? And I just think so many of us in tech have changed so much the last 2.5 years, and folks are jaded, folks are pissed off, many folks really that were selling, especially in 2021 and late 2022 when it was easier, in second half of 2020, they haven't recovered. They haven't recovered because of how much harder it was, right? It wasn't even a bubble because the markets justified it, but those good times lasted so long that it became just times, not good times. It became normalized, and they can't recover. And so a lot of the folks you're talking about that are 28 and up, they're pissed off, or they don't want to work in the world we are today, and they don't want to work harder. And that's what I think Brendan is saying. And honestly, it's a closed door conversation I have with almost every revenue leader, is they don't want to hire these broken, angry, pissed off people. They don't. Okay. Now, and just don't, if I had to do a different presentation of who not to hire in sales today, don't hire the bitter, the broken, and the angry. It's not their fault. Don't hire them. Do not, no matter how good their LinkedIn is, no matter where don't hire the bitter, the broken, or the angry. So listen, does that mean you should hire all folks that just graduated this year because they didn't live in 2021? I mean, maybe. I kind of am feeling that way myself. I kind of want to personally only want to work with people that weren't even in the workforce in 2021. But on the other hand, if you need domain expertise or senior folks, it's also not practical, right? So look, the folks that are fresh out of school, they're hungry, they're malleable, they want it, and they're not already kind of think that stuff that too many folks in sales think things don't work. Those work. I mean, we had someone who I love. We have a tiny sales team at SaaStr, but it lets me keep kind of running the lab and running experiments. We have someone who I love, who I've worked with for many years, kind of pre-joined our sales team. He never even joined. He pre-joined, right? And at the end of the first day, he came with a list of 10 things we were doing wrong and how he was going to do everything differently than how we do it. Now we're 10 people doing 20 million a year. We don't have time to deal with his issues of why everything we're doing is wrong with 10 people, and why he's going to change every single process we're doing because he knows best. That's the problem with these folks today, and you don't want to hire them. But listen, you know that the best hires of all are the experienced but young at heart. That's the magic 2x2. Can you find the person with 10, 15, 20 years of experience that has the energy of someone with 3, right? That's the Goldilocks thing. Can you find them where they're not bitter or broken or burnt out or only want to manage managers who manage managers and managers, right? Those Goldilocks hires, they're rare, but I would try to find 1 or 2 for the team. If you're hiring all 21-year-olds, I would hire a 41-year-old or a 51-year-old that is truly young at heart, that bounces off the room like someone half their age. And if they have a little bit of experience, you want yin and yang on the sales team, right? So long way of saying, if nothing else, don't hire the bitter or the broken. But if you can hire some experience onto this at 40K ACV, this isn't 2K. This isn't a 1-call close. So there is some benefit from having some experience on the team. That's my best answer to figuring it out today. So thanks for the question.
Great answer. Thank you very much.
Thanks.
Cool. Thanks for that question. I know we've got a few hand raisers, but I'm going to try and go in as much of an order as I can. So I think Marin, you've got a couple questions for Jason if you want to come off mute.
Hello, Jason. Me again, hopefully with a better connection. But basically, like on the point about mentors. So for me, as kind of like a seed stage founder, like what would be the optimal profile for a mentor to get? Basically, like how would you go about finding them, and in what way would you compensate or not them for the advice and for the help they give you? I'm interested in the ones that would, be strict but be acting in good faith.
Yeah.
Like
okay. So listen, where do I would I would try to find 2 mentors if I could, ideally. One is someone in a very similar industry, maybe even a peer, that's something like 24 months ahead of you. Okay. I'll give you an example. I'm on the board of an e-commerce company at 70 million in revenue. Okay. And that's a lot. That's great. Right. But there's a whole set of issues they're facing now about going up market and going multi-product, all these issues. We just brought on this guy to a board in the industry doing 150. Like, it was the best board meeting we've had in 3 years. He pushed on everything we've been taught and distilled it all. And it was an ass kicker. The comments were they were tough. Like, going to our points, CEO had to be tough because it was actually the most critical board meeting we've ever had, even though it was just the outside director. But he was 2 years ahead. He's like, you should think about dropping this. You're too slow here. You've got to do this. And it was the ass kicking we talked about, and it was great. So that's literally, and they were friends since they'd been friends for 5 years, but he came on the board. And it was different because actually, even though they've been friends, he'd never really been on the board or an advisor. So the type of feedback he gave was very different because the role changed, right? So a peer 24 months ahead, 10 years ahead is too far, right? And don't hire someone 6 months ahead because it's just you. It's too close, right? So that's the one I would fire. And listen, if you network with enough people in your industry, and you're likable, eventually someone will because they'll get something, because you'll also be doing something they're not doing. So they'll want to mentor you at some level because they'll get something out of it. You're the next generation. You're further ahead in AI. You've got a fresh approach. You've got overlapping customers. So you'll get someone at a few years ahead of you that wants to do it because there's something into it, right? This 150 million guy said, listen, this one at 70, they're doing some things we're not doing. So I'm learning, even though he's learning from me, this is worth my time. I'm learning from him, right? The second one you should do is, if this works in your career, just go find the best boss you've ever had and make them your mentor and give them shares. The best boss you've ever had. Maybe that's not who you need in 4 or 8 years, but just go find them. And how do you compensate them? Look, I mean, there's some rough metrics. In the early days, in the very beginning, outside, if they're a director, they usually get 1%, which is a lot. As you scale, that typically declines to about 0.2%. So it goes from 1% to maybe 0.5% at the Series B to like 0.2% in the growth phase, like 1.52 for a board member. And then as you in the IPO phase, it's not really about percentage, it's about equity. I mean, it's about value of the equity. So you try to give someone a couple $1 million when you're going public, and hopefully the stock goes up 10x. So that couple million vesting over 4 years, right? Becomes 20 million if it 10x, and if it goes down, it becomes very little. But that 1%, 0.5%, 0.2% for board is. For advisors, it really varies. There's no magical thing. I think though that if I think this 0.2% in the early days for the best one is a good thing, invested over 4 to 5 years. So if they quit, it's really nothing, right? That's a good framework. Some folks maybe more. Some folks will be less, you know, this 0.2 to 0.1 in the early days for just 2 people. It's a bargain, right?
Sure.
Yeah. And if it needs to be more and it vests and they're great, just give them more. Like it's either, they're either worth more or worth less, or they're not going to be worth what you give them. It's either more or less. Right. So good questions. Thank you.
Okay, cool. Thank you.
Cool. Awesome. Let me go to Stosha. Sorry if I said your name wrong.
Hi. Hi, Jason. Thanks
Hi.
for weekly Zooms are very, very insightful. And you are probably the only one in the industry who's doing this kind of like high level content. My question for you is related to marketing agencies. So basically outsourcing the demand gen and lead gen towards the marketing agencies as a
strategy to throw all your money down the drain. Is that the question? Or to lose, is it a strategy to lose all your capital or half your capital? Is that the question? How much will you lose?
That's what I'm asking. Are there any good agencies or like
No.
kind of...
No. There are listen, there are good agencies out there. I don't mean to say that.
I mean,
Is there any agency on planet Earth that before you have a brand, before you have 5, 10, 20 million in revenue, can magically get you customers part-time with a junior resource that you can't get on your own? What do you think the answer is when I describe it? Part-time with a junior resource that doesn't know you or the industry. How many leads are they going to get you? None. And okay, we're the rare exceptions. One, the principles work for you. No business development, no anything. It's a small agency. Amelia was the VP of demand gen at Brex. She's on her own. She's got a handful of clients, and it's her. It's not her team. It's her. That's not going to work great, but I'll still take that, right? Because it's her. So any agency where here's my role for a startup, or frankly, any agency where you have to go through, anyone that's business development or sales in it, 0% chance. Small percent chance if the principals are doing the work, okay? So that's for you in the founder-led areas. Now later, when you hire a real head of marketing or even a CMO, that's hitting their numbers, okay? That's taking you from 10 to 20, 20 to 30, whatever, right? Even 5 to 10, and you have budget, okay? Most senior marketers have been around for a while. They have 1 or 2 agencies they have worked with over the years, and they know are good, and they have worked. Let them do it. Like that's their team. Do they want to insource, outsource, whatever mix? Like maybe it's not who you would use, but they've worked with Guillaume for years at his SEO agency, and they trust him, and they'll hit their number. You got to trust your team to pick their agencies. So long way of saying is most marketers have 1 or 2 folks in their back pocket that they know work. Founders, 0% chance if sales is involved, small percent chance if the principals are good, and they'll do the work themselves. But there's no there's no shortcuts, right? So, but good question. Thank you.
Cool. Thank you. Let's go to Michael next. I'm going to add you in here. Cool.
Thank you, Jason. Great session. We talk a lot about founder-led sales.
Procure, pay, and close. It's Airbase.
It's Airbase, yeah.
You just got a free commercial going out to almost 100,000 people when this goes through the podcast and YouTube. And bring them back. Come back as a sponsor. It's Airbase. Amelia, how do we say it again?
I still have an Airbase water bottle.
Is it pay, close, procure? How does it go at Airbase, Amelia?
Procure, pay, close.
Procure. Yeah. Let's do it slow again for all the folks that'll listen on the podcast. Procure, pay, close. It's Airbase. Okay, what's the question?
So we talk a lot about founder-led sales. What advice for the technical audience, the technical founders do you have for founder-led marketing? Right, it's out of their comfort zone.
Sure.
They're an engineering product mind.
Look, most founders think. Listen, here, the best advice, most founders are, unless you come out of a marketing background, they're pretty bad at this classic toolkit, right? They don't know how to do all this growth hacking and fake spam emails and lookups and stuff. But most founders are okay at kind of like the visionary part of marketing. Like, where's the market going? What's the real value? How are we changing? Like most founders are pretty good at like, listen, the procurement world is pretty staid. It's pretty boring. Here's how it's changing. They're pretty good at that. These founders are pretty good at that. So what you have to say, of all the things that you don't know how to do in marketing, what's the best thing that you can do to get that message out, right? And so the classic thing that a lot of founders who know nothing end up doing is content marketing, right? So like Brian Halligan and Dharmesh Shah in the early days, they challenged themselves. I think they each wrote I can't remember, they did this Astra session together. They either wrote 2 blog posts each a day or 2 a week or 2 something, but they forced themselves every single day. They had to write content about this. Was it perfect? No, but it was, of all the things they didn't really know, it was the one thing they were good at and could explain how to do the limited types of things HubSpot did in the early days, website grading and SEO. It didn't even do marketing automation in the beginning, right? It wasn't even the HubSpot today. So like, what are the things, and so that's like, figure out what's the best thing. And so like, don't do a podcast if it's not the best thing. It's so much time to set up a podcast. Like, I think actually the lamest thing you can do in marketing today is podcasts. So many people want to do, I get emails, and they need like, Amelia knows this because we work with big companies. They need like 11 people on their team to do a podcast. It takes them like 8 months to set it up. They do like 4, it gets 8 downloads and they quit. Like that, you don't have time for that. But listen, if you really think you can build the best podcast in your industry and are committed 52 weeks, if that's your best idea, do it. Content marketing, do it, right? If you're good at if you're good at ABM, like whether that's sales or marketing, if you're good at outbound, just do more of it. Like, it doesn't have to be great, but if you're pretty good at like going to LinkedIn and finding the world's perfect Airbase customer and writing them the world's perfect email, like, here's why Airbase, it's a crowded space. I know you're probably using these other solutions. Here are the 3 reasons why your top 2 competitors are using Airbase. And here's why actually we're better than the 88 folks that seem the same as us. And if you can write the world's best email, then that's a superpower, right? Instead of that crappy email we get 100 of each day, isn't it? So look, you know how to present, you know how to tell the world why you're changing it, and then just figure out the best medium to do it. And even though it's not going to work that well, it's going to work if you do it every single day, like the Dharmesh Bryant example. That's my best idea. And don't do the stuff that doesn't work. You don't understand. Just don't do it. Wait until you hire someone to do the stuff you don't understand or how to do. Don't try. You can do do a quick experiment, right? But don't become Mr. Clips if it's not you.
Yeah, I mean, we're lucky that Tejo, our founder, is very comfortable being a spokesperson, getting out there, doing interviews. But I think for a lot of technical founders, they don't want to get out of they're very introverted. So they
but you know what I'll tell you, for the technical stuff, like some of the more successful, like developer focused startups I've invested in, Algolia, and Revenue Cat, right? They were, very different, but they were both, if you look in the early days, they were great at these content marketing. Revenue Cat wrote this early post as developer, like the Revenue Cat team, they automate 30% of mobile subscriptions. Okay. And they actually did it even before their company. They did another company before. So in the early days of 2018, they were experts on managing mobile subscriptions. And they wrote this post about how it all worked in iOS and Android when nobody really understood it. And so many people wrote this. It wasn't the world's best. It was a good product pitch. I wrote it up on SaaS, you can search for it, but it really explains something. And everyone read on this, on how to do payments on mobile, right? Similarly, in the early days of Algolia, I remember when it was at about $10,000 a month in revenue. Back then, it was a very narrow search API, but for small object search, it was like 50 to 100 times faster than Elastic, 20 to 50 times. But they only did this little thing, and they wrote this great piece of content explaining like, we love Elastic. It's the company isn't, but the product's open source. It's terrific. There's this one area where we're better. This one area, and they showed all the data. Here's the type of small object search where we can return all the e-commerce searches in 8 milliseconds. And Elastic's goal is more horizontal, and it takes 10 times longer, and they don't find the object. And so we're not saying use us for this. Don't use us for this. Don't use us for that. But here's the exact data on where if speed matters for e-commerce search in 2014, and everyone read that stuff, right? And so those are some canonical pieces. Did they know? In Revenue Cat, they're still primarily PLG today, right? As they're coming up on 50 million. Algolia, actually, the founders forced themselves to do outbound in the early days. But both of them found that as engineers, they're comfortable not just typing code, but typing data, learnings, the schema for mobile subscription to Revenue Cat, or the exact honest data of, in this one area, how do we compare to Elastic? Not overall where we're not better. But they're very comfortable with data saying, here's one area where 10x better. That 10x feature thing's magical. So that's an example, right? So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Awesome. Cool. Robert, if you're still there, I'm going to come add you in. So let me see if you'll come up here.
Hey guys. Hey Jason. Thanks for this lovely session.
Thanks for joining.
Yeah, thank you. This is my first one, and I'm also looking forward to meet you guys on the SaaStr event in September. I was having one quick question for you.
Yes.
What would you advise a founder for a startup? What would you advise to take the steps to do a good or great product launch? How would you see that? How would you advise someone to do it, rather than just pushing the button, putting on the market, and then struggling to find clients and customers and so on and so forth?
Look, I don't know.
Um,
I don't know that I had the perfect answer to this one. I will just tell you a couple learnings. First of all, it's funny. There was the CEO of Product Hunt did this thread. You might have seen it on Twitter this week, saying you can launch more than once on Product Hunt. You can, and I forget who they had, Linear or someone said we launched 5 times on Product Hunt. So much in the way like safes changed fundraising. Now folks will raise like a lot of little safes when it used to have to be a seed round. I don't think there's such thing as one launch anymore. You can launch multiple times, and media has changed, right? It is harder to get attention, and no one really takes, there's so many apps. People don't, in the old days, I mean, I don't want to mean to date myself, but there were so few SaaS apps in the old days. Like, you could read every single new app on TechCrunch, like every single app that came out. So a launch was so important because you got your one article on TechCrunch, right? Today there's just a trillion. So I don't even think it's a linear thing. You can do a launch. So look, I also think that's why a launch is no longer a magical moment. I don't think this is Twitter at South by Southwest where you magically come out of someone and people are like, wow, I want to use your procurement software because your launch was so exciting. I don't know. It could be sequential. I think just there's only two. I can only give you 2 minor pieces of advice, and maybe this is not the best. I'm not the best answerer of this question. One is the one thing I know is if you are going to put all the energy into having a launch, right? Team energy, marketing energy, don't launch with a crummy product. This is where I think there's bad advice on the internet. Launch with a truly sellable product. It cannot be. It's going to be feature poor. It's not going to do everything. But whatever you do, whatever it does do, it better be great. It better do one thing great, because you're wasting your energy if you're not good enough. So I know everyone, I love Y Combinator, I love everything, but this build fast and launch it thing, I don't know, man. For most of us, it's too risky to have a bad launch. And I wrote this post on SaaStr. Both of my startups I launched too early, and it was devastating. It was devastating. With Adobe, I know they're both a while ago. With Adobe and X-Time, we launched, we got a ton of traffic. I hacked it. I did this a few times in the old days. I would get lots of PR on New Year's Day because there's no press on New Year's Day. So I would ask everyone to write me up on New Year's Day. There'd be nothing else, and you'd get a much bigger lift launching on New Year's Day. I think that's still a trick today too. Launch on a holiday, right? If you can get someone to write you up, it's like the articles in the Wall Street Journal on the weekends. They're all like articles that you could write you could have written a year ago. Reporters get tired, so if you give them a free article on New Year's Day, it can be kind of a mitzvah. But the product just didn't work well enough. It was too slow. Part of the product didn't work, and I just wasted all of those users. Right. In my first startup, I launched shortly because both times, frankly, is because we were running out of time, which we really weren't. The first one, we had could have been a $10 million customer, and we shipped him a product that was just too early and didn't work at all. It took me 3 years to get them back at all. So I'm really against launching too early. I really think you have to be careful with some of this advice on the internet, but you can launch multiple times. And then, look, the last thing I'll tell you, and this is barely helpful, but since this launching thing, like being on Product Hunt isn't magical, being in media doesn't even matter anymore. Like no one reads blog. I mean, people still read SaaStr, but it's all from SEO and searches. No one types SaaStr.com anymore. It just doesn't happen, right? The world's changed. So I don't even know if a launch means anything, but there are always leaders in your industry who, if you can tell a good story, like how you're disrupting industry, they will get interested. There are always folks with some following, some stature in your industry that will take that call. So if nothing else, I would invest my time. I would identify 10 folks that are leaders in my industry, talk to them and ask if they'll write something, write an article, write a blog post, write a LinkedIn post, write something. 1, that will get you some attention because they're thought leaders. 2, you can thoughtfully recycle it. You can turn it into content on your website. You can retweet it and re-LinkedIn it and repost it. If someone in your industry that's influential writes a great piece on launch day, here's the beauty to social media today. You can just hit repost on LinkedIn 365 days a year. You can just put that one to the top of your feed ad nauseum. It is so easy to retweet and repost stuff. It's a gift. You don't even have to move it over to your site or move it to your collateral. You can just retweet or repost that thing forever. So I'll break here. My best idea is to get 10 people that matter in your industry excited to write about it. And I think that content, rather than some random article that will disappear in 30 seconds or a tweet, this is enduring, right? The industry leaders' feedback will be enduring for you.
Thanks, Jason. Yes, that's absolutely correct. I was thinking about this, and I also thinking about some teaser effects. But anyway, maybe we can catch up more on the SaaStr event.
Awesome. Cool. Well, I'm going to add Karan here, and then I think we've got time for one more question after that. And sorry, let me add you back, Jason. I lost you. There we go.
Hey, Jason.
Hey, thanks for the time.
I really appreciate all the nuggets of wisdom. Been following you for a while. Met you at SaaStr last year.
Oh, great.
So, Jason, we are in the GTM space, building an all-in-one go-to-market platform with an agent, AI SDR.
Great. A competitive space.
Yes, it's a super competitive space. We've been growing well. Like we went from 300K to almost 2 million in the last 9 months.
Awesome.
Wanted to understand, like, because it's a cluttered space, we have a very clear differentiation on like going deep into ICP and then aggregating multiple databases like Clay and then doing a lot of work on events, and other things. How do we build that brand and the positioning? We are getting great results from our clients, a lot of love, growing at a decent clip. The only thing now for us is, hey, how do we go to the next level in terms of building the brand and continuing the momentum?
Well, look, I don't have any magic answers to your questions, but I will give you two tips. But I don't have any magic answers. One is there's an old SaaStr post I re-update with some frequency on a mini brand, and just realize the best way to build a brand in SaaS is to get to 100, 200, 500 happy customers, some number. And it usually happens earlier than we think. It usually happens somewhere around 2 to 3 million in revenue, where sure, Mark Benioff hasn't heard of you if you're in the sales space, but people in the industry start to hear about you, right? I think people started to hear about Clay and Apollo and others when they were just at a couple million in revenue, right? Because it's enough that people start, especially if you're in an industry where people talk, I mean, it's probably true of almost every category, frankly, where you start to get a mini brand about just a couple million in revenue. So realize that it will, like, you're going to have 99 problems, but this one will solve itself a little bit if you just make a couple hundred customers happy. However you get them, content marketing, outbound, inbound, left bound, right bound, that will get you to a mini brand. And then you should nurture it. Make sure you have good customer success. Start to do steak dinners with customers, start to do events, start to bring folks together so that they can create a virtuous cycle. But number one is just getting to enough customers that you have a mini brand in your, like there's so many AI SDRs out there, right? There's so many products, a million, but people are interested in it, right? If you get 500 customers, you're going to be in a lot of conversations, even if you do nothing for marketing, right? So that's number one. The number two one, which I know folks know, but they don't do enough of it. And I know it's work, but be present. Don't write dumb LinkedIn comments on everything I write. Don't like do dumb things. Don't like respond to every tweet with, oh, you like sales, use my AI thing. I'm going to block you or mute you anyway, or leave you from the thread. That stuff that's dumb stuff. But what I mean is be a good person and be present. Like, if you're like, participate at SaaStr Annual and be around, participate in everything, like show up everywhere. Like when you talk to marketers that do a lot of field events and stuff, there's really two strategies that marketers, because we work with a lot of marketers. I didn't know this until maybe 4 or 5 years ago, frankly. There's two ways that marketers that have big budgets do events, like big events like Dreamforce and SaaStr and Inbound and stuff. One is go big or go home. So they put a lot of money into one event, right? And they're like, I got to be at RSA. And they buy the $2 million booth at RSA because it matters in security. And there's reasons that's important, because the biggest events, people with budget come, right? They come to RSA to decide who they're going to give millions and millions of dollars to. The other one that a lot of folks do is, and I see a lot of folks that are developer centric really good at this, is they do a horizontal strategy and they make sure they're everywhere, and they don't blow 2 million at RSA, but they put 20K at 100 events. Now that's more work. You got to show up. You got to be there. But I remember like Algolia, we talked about Algolia and Revenue Cat and Developer. They both have run this playbook. Algolia ran in the beginning. Every developer event that was there, they would be there with the table, right? Revenue Cat is since they brought on a new marketer who's great, they're at every single event that is in payments or billing where developers, but everyone, they're at 100% of them. They're always there. And being present, if you have a mini brand, it's just magical, because they're always talking about you. Always look bigger and better and stronger than you are if you're there. If you don't show up, and your competitor is there, they're going to talk about your competitor, aren't they? So don't do the dumb things. Don't do the stupid comments. Like people say, it doesn't work. But whether it's however you can do it, just be present, right? And be gracious. And these aren't perfect answers, but I don't see people doing either of these that much. So thanks for the question.
Thank you.
Cool. Chase, do you have time for one last one?
We can do one last question, then we'll wrap. Thank you.
All right, Ashish, I'm going to add you for our last question.
Last bonus question.
So thanks for taking my question. Love your work. I watched about 99% of your videos. I'm too broke to travel to the actual event. So
well, next year you won't be. You'll keep growing.
Yeah, 100%. Hopefully, or maybe you guys will come to Middle East. That makes it easier. But
awesome.
Yeah. So we're building a B2B2C fintech in Saudi and the UAE, which provides open banking solutions to large retailers, basically allowing consumers like you and I to link our bank accounts directly to loyalty programs for automatic rewards. It's super regulated. We need a special open finance license with minimum capital requirements of about $300,000. And we've got like small angel checks, but we face a lot of rejections from VCs who want to see traction. They want to see revenue, even though
you're not appropriate for 99% of VCs.
Yeah, no, but I'm pitching to the ones that call themselves pre-seed. But I think in this side of the world, like people don't invest.
You need pre-seed.
Yeah, it's kind of like a rare commodity over
here. Tell me quickly the question, and then I'll give you a few thoughts. Right? Is the question, where do I find funding?
No, it's basically like, do we continue raising like small kind of angel checks, 25, 50K at a time, or do we kind of pivot to become, not pivot, but just take a longer road, become like the 100th white label loyalty solution provider, get some traction, then go back to VCs and then raise, and then stay true to the mission?
Look, I don't know. I'll just give you two comments that are not perfect answers to your question, then we can break. One is just realize for folks in general, you've realized this, right? First of all, 99% of VC dollars goes to Series A and later by dollars. Okay. So that means almost everyone if you're before, forget about seed. If you're not even Series A, that's not by deal volume, but by dollars. 99% of it goes there. It's Stripe raising, OpenAI raising billions of dollars, and that cascades all the way through. Wiz raising another round of 22 billion. That's where most of this venture capital goes. The early stage stuff, especially in B2B, I've been doing this for most B2B seed investors, pre-seed investors, still want 8,000 a month in revenue, 10,000 a month in revenue, and they want you to be growing quickly. They're not really formation stage. If you're 6 guys out of Stripe and you were the top team, or you're 3 developers out of OpenAI that were the crack team, great, because you're going to get credit for it. If no one's ever heard of you, and you don't have that 8 to 10K in revenue, 99.99% of investors. Venture capital is not it's not designed for hope and a prayer. This is misunderstood by so many folks. Venture capital is designed to take measured risk at different stage. Growth investors take measured risk before the IPO. Late seed investors take measured risk that early but real traction will be maintained, right? Late seed investors invest between 100, 200K and $1 million in revenue. You've already got customers. You're referenceable. You can do diligence, right? And so they're all taking measured types of risk. Venture capital is not designed. I mean, true angels are angels. Bless their souls. They're angels. They come in and you have nothing and no revenue, and they pay a price that is always too high. Even if you're at $1 million pre, you're really telling me your pre-revenue nothing company is worth $1 million? That's worth nothing. These are angels. Bless their soul. But 99.99% of the industry are not. They are taking here, and I know you know this, they're taking measured risk. Understand that. And so don't beat yourself up. So the earlier you and so the other related point, and then this will tie to the second one, and then we'll break. The earlier you are in, the more you got to just hustle even more and talk to even more people and find even more folks that will take that risk, and the more personal it is. And there's a reason even Jeff Bezos had to raise a lot of money from mom and dad, as did Bill Gates. Like it was not everyone saw it in the early days at Microsoft and Amazon. Okay. Now, having said all that, you've already raised some money, right? So you're a hustler, you're a hustler. And so you're saying, God, this is frustrating. Should I raise 25 and 50K checks, or should I wait and go bigger? I mean, I don't know the answer, but what I can tell you, a great thing, and we did talk about this earlier today, it has changed in investing not just in the Bay Area, but all across the world, it is more okay to raise lots of little checks. It is okay to raise lots of little safes and notes and stuff. It used to be an anathema. It used to be a negative, right? It used to be there. We know when I started investing in 2013, Hunter Walk wrote this, and we wrote the same post at the same time. He's at Homebrew, which is wildly successful. And he wrote this post that a second seed is usually a sign of death, but here's when it works. And when I started investing, I didn't know second seeds were terrible. So I did second seeds in Pipedrive and Algolia that were all worth billions, and SalesLoft. No one told me second seeds were a sign of a failing startup. So I'm like, I'll do all of them. Those are good ones. The world. So listen, I don't think it's binary. Raise them. If you can, keep raising. Today, a lot of folks raise dribs and dabs, and it's slow and it's frustrating. And sometimes they go years, and finally they reach that escape velocity. And finally it gets easier. And sometimes it gets like when Ben Chestnut came to Sastrano, he was like, I couldn't even why is MailChimp the most successful bootstrapped ever, right? No capital to 12 billion. He's like, no one would give me money until I didn't need it.
Yeah.
He's like, by the time any VC would give me money, I was already profitable and didn't need it. So, but my point is that, like, hopefully that's not, but they went through a phase transition, right? Unfundable, then fundable. So hack it. My best advice is don't overanalyze it. If you want it badly enough, if you're willing to, you and your co-founders are willing to do this for 10 to 12, 15 years, do what it takes. And if that means banging your head against the wall and running around in the Middle East, raising a lot of 25K checks, well, many folks even better than you have done just that to raise the early money, right? So, all right. Thanks, everybody. Really appreciate the time.
Hey, Jason.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jason. Thanks, guys.